Let's go.
Welcome back, everybody, to another anime review. Today we are talking about the movie King of Thorn. This is a movie that was suggested by Aves Monkeo. Thank you again for your suggestions. I'm loving them. And a little bit about this film. It is originally titled Ibara no O. If I mispronounce that, again, as always, my bad. This is a film that came out back in 2009. It was I would say a solid hour, 50 minutes, 2 hours tops on this, but hour 50 minutes if you cut through some of the stuff. This is a film that, for the better part, is a sci-fi horror. Quick synopsis of this film is that you have a virus that's overtaking the world, causing massive devastation. The hope is that a group of people will be cryogenically frozen and they will become the subjects of a cure for the future. But when the group awaken, they are met with a horrific situation. And that's how the movie, for a nutshell, is. Now, of course, if you don't want to hear any spoilers and you want to go to my review where I don't drop any knowledge bombs or what happens in the film, skip to the end. You'll see that right here below. And other than that, let's get this baby started. So we start off our film in the city where we see people walking around, cars driving around. Seems all normal, casual, and then you see the shadow coming down from the sky, and as it gets larger and larger, we see it's a woman falling from a building, hitting the ground. As devastating as that may be, then they pan over to the woman's body on the ground, and it looks like rubble. There's no blood, no guts, nothing. Then we get a quick newsreel. Apparently there's a new virus in town. It's called the Medusa virus. And what happens is, if you're infected, the virus stays essentially dormant in your body for about roughly 30 days. Then once it activates, you start getting symptoms, and then all of a sudden the final phase kicks in, and you just essentially petrify. You turn to stone. This all happens like after the 30-day mark. You're pretty much done within that day. You got 12 to 24 hours and you're done. So it's a very fast-acting virus, and then on top of which, the mortality rate is like 100%. You're guaranteed to die. So what happens after this, you get that newsreel, then you see, looks like government officials discussing about the origin of the virus, and they suspect that it's this organization that is running the show, that they released the virus. And the concern is that this organization is also the organization that wants to save the people by cryogenically freezing a group of people, selected roughly 160 people, so that they will be test subjects as well as set to cure the virus. And when they awake, they should be cured. We find out in that conversation with the government officials that this is all part of that organization's plan, because the owner of the organization is like a religious zealot, and he believes he's been selected by God and he's doing God's work. Now, what that all entitles and means, we'll find out later, but they orchestrate a plan to infiltrate. Then we pan over to a series of buses that are coming in to the facility that is going to be housing all these people. It's located in Scotland, and the year that is set for is 2015, so it's not back when this movie came out. This was in the future, but this is our past now. But basically, it's like a super castle in Scotland that they're going to. And as the buses are pulling in, you get introduced to our various characters. And as they're introducing the characters through dialogue, we get narration from one of our characters, who is this blonde woman who is just reading the story of Sleeping Beauty. The funny thing is, she's reading it aloud to like everybody, but no one's really caring, no one's really listening. Notice that she has the book, and she has a photo of a young boy in the book, so we don't know if that's her son, if there's some relevance there. But we see our other characters. We see one character who is like a convict or ex-con. He's being dragged in by other officials. And then there's our token black guy. And I say that because he's literally the only black guy in the entire group of 160 people. There's one of our main characters who is Kasumi, and there's another one, Shizuku. Now, both of these characters are actually twins. They're tied together, but the key is they're not really going to be both going into the facility. So I'm actually skipping a lot of the characters because we'll get more interested in them later on. as the entire time they're focusing on like introducing the characters to the castle that they're in. We see that anybody who's being part of the program gets strapped with a bracelet. It basically tells you when your time is up. If it's white or silver, you're okay. If you get black spots, that means the virus has activated. You don't have much time to live. It's that simple. They give them a quick introduction that in the cryo tubes, you'll still be able to dream, but you'll have nothing but great dreams because the computer actually monitors and programs your dreams how they are supposed to be, kind of like a Matrix style. And then the idea is like you're supposed to be cryogenically frozen. You can be maintained there for up to 100 years. Not to say that they're supposed to be there 100 years, it's just that they can be maintained. Now, while they're supposed to be chilling there, Kasumi and Shizuku are going out to look over the cliffs, and you see Kasumi is very distraught. She's been wanting to leave the entire time, and you realize that she's had a bracelet and her sister doesn't because she's been accepted for the program and the other hasn't. So the fear is that she's not going to be able to see her sister when she gets out, A, because of the virus, and B, because it potentially could take up to 100 years. And her sister's just trying to reassure her and like gives her a pinky swear promise that like everything's gonna be okay, I will be here, we'll always be together, that kind of thing. And then we cut to another scene where Kasumi's coming into the lab. Now you see her kind of depressed and upset, and she's looking around. She gets into one of the tubes, and it seems like that's it. The machine kicks in, tells her she's going to have dreams, everything's going to be okay. And as soon as she goes to sleep, she wakes up shortly afterwards, and things are different now. No longer is it clean. Things are dark. There's vines everywhere with thorns all over the vines. She looks down and she sees what looks like to be a body. And then all of a sudden, all the other capsules around in this big catacomb of a room open up, and the rest of the 160 people come out. They're all disoriented. They don't know what's going on. And she's starting to climb down, and this bat-like creature flies down onto her too. Freaks her out, and she got caught by some of the survivors while she fell. So she survived, thankfully. And everybody's like, what freaked you out? What's going on? And she's like, there's like this bat-like creature. And as they're trying to get out, one of the bats lands on the arm of another woman, and it looks at her and it opens up its face to reveal like just like more teeth and more fangs and bigger mouth underneath, and just like literally eats this woman's face off. And then we notice that everybody starts looking up, and there's like hundreds of these creatures just flying down to try to consume the survivors. And they're all freaking out. And one person points to the elevator for them to escape, and then they're all trying to rush the elevator, and the elevator won't open. So you have a mob of people that are stampeding over other people trying to escape from these bats. The one convict guy, he doesn't give a damn. He, takes off his shirt, starts hitting these things 1, 2, 3 with like a club. They finally get the door open, and people, being that stampede mentality, flood in, and they actually fall into the elevator shaft because there was actually no elevator there except for this giant mouth. I wouldn't say salamander, but kind of giant crawfish looking creature that was sitting at the bottom, just ate everybody up all at one time. And as they're trying to close the elevator door again, one guy actually gets caught by a tentacle and gets, I wouldn't say sandwiched between the doors because the doors were closing, but he was wedged in there, and it just folded him in half and pulled him through. It was pretty bloody. So now, all from 160, we're down to, I would say, 7 survivors. And of those 7 survivors, we have the ex-con, Kasumi, that we mentioned before. Turns out we have the one black guy that was the token black man. He's actually survived. He turns out he's a cop. We have that woman who was narrating Sleeping Beauty, and we have a little boy who is heavy into video games. And he calls those birds death birds because they're just like how they are in the game. Then we have a guy who says he was a engineer for the organization, which becomes relevant. And then a Italian politician who bribed his way on. They're making their way out through another exit that the engineer is familiar with. And as they're doing that, they're all bickering and arguing and not really paying attention to the things that should be going on. And they hit a dead end where there's just water flooding through, and they're chewing out the elderly Italian because he's just pretty much there because he bribed his way. He doesn't really care about anybody else. And as soon as all of them are bickering about this, another creature comes up. It's like this minotaur-like reptilian creature that essentially chomps on your head, holds it there, uses its tongue to wrap around your head, and then it rips your head off your torso. That was enough to freak people out. and they decided to beat feet and jump into water. They took a chance, and you see other creatures, but the other creatures don't act on attacking them in the water. But when they get out, you think they will learn their lesson and not argue anymore, but no, they continue. And apparently the sound draws these creatures in, because then now there's a bunch of these minotaur-like creatures just chasing them down, and they're running down a new corridor that leads to what I would say is like the armory, or the security room. Is the security there. They manage to fend off one of the creatures. They close the door and they shoot it dead, and instantly, as after it gets killed, it turns to stone. It gets petrified. So the people are wondering now, are these like actually infected by Medusa, or are they like a byproduct of Medusa? Have they been asleep for so long that Medusa has infected like some kind of animal and then caused a genetic mutation? And this is what they're seeing. While they're there, they decide to do some investigating, and they're looking into some of the records, and they notice that it's only been 8 hours since they've been frozen, and they really haven't been asleep for like 100 years. They've been only asleep 8 hours. At least this is what it shows on the computer. Now the people are still dealing with a little bit of hysteria, and the little boy is the most calm of all of them. He is actually very, very calm, but that's because he's rationalizing everything like a video game. He's telling him that's the Deathsaurus. That's not a reptilian minotaur thing. That's what it's called. And he's like, you guys gotta listen to me. This is how you beat them. This is how we go to the next level. The woman that was reading Sleeping Beauty is like freaking out and is getting ready to slap the child because he won't stop talking about the video game. And everybody's like, whoa, we should all probably calm down before we do things that we would regret. And I could swear, like, the way that she's acting makes me feel like she has like some kind of PTSD about child abuse or something like that. But she was definitely about to lay hands on a kid that's not her own. But the things she was saying beforehand is also what was making me feel that way, because she was like just looking at me with those eyes like I'm so innocent, like I can't do no wrong. And it's like that's definitely something behind the picture there. Either way, they start recognizing that the guy, the engineer who got them there, he knows too much. He's too familiar with the systems and the items and everything. And they start calling him out on it, and they're like, who are you? What are you here? You know too much. You gotta fess up now. And he pulls a gun and he puts it on Kasumi, takes her hostage, and they go into the elevator because no one wants to act in case he'll shoot her. And they're going up now while everybody else was left down. In the elevator, he's freaking out a little bit because he's like, I can't believe I got to the stage. He's like, and you, I remember you. And they've pan to a flash where they show him an outfit that is that of a doctor or scientist outfit. He turns around and he sees these doors open, and behind the doors are like this bright yellow light, and the vines are moving, and then out from the light comes Kasumi. But then it pans back. We cut to everybody else that was left behind. They're gonna try to go back up too, because you gotta remember that the lab, like any laboratory, is underground. It's not worth its salt if it's above ground. So they have to travel the tunnels and whatnot to climb up. Now, as they're doing this, they're trying to sneak past these other creatures. That doesn't work too well because the lady is carrying a child at one point. She slips, she has to grab a vine, she cuts her hand, she screams, and alerts all the other creatures. The ex-con, who I'm going to just call him Marco because that's his name, he decides to run distraction and start shooting all the creatures with the weapons that they have acquired. Now, I should mention that they have a fair amount of weapons because apparently this lab facility is armed to the teeth, better than some military facilities. They were not joking around about security. So he's just going to town with all these creatures, like Rambo style. Cut back to Kasumi. She had blacked out. She was remembering her time with her sister before the facility. How her sister used to be like good, athletic, but she got hurt and got a scar on her leg herself. Then they lost their parents due to the virus. Now both of them got infected, but only Kasumi was qualified to become a member of the program, and Kasumi had tried to kill herself. Kasumi's dealing with a lot of depression and issues about this. And you see the two of them flash back to the time that they're on the cliff and they're talking, and Shizuku is just reinforcing, like, Shizuku's like a strong pillar for Kasumi. She is a very strong pillar for her. Gives her that guidance that and then she wakes up. She wakes up in the elevator, the lights are blown out. She comes out. She sees like these test subjects, like tubes of creatures and variations. She hears dialogue being given. She hears the scientists, and then she hears Marco talking. Now, Marco was downstairs originally killing those creatures, but now he made it upstairs on his own, and they're talking, and it turns out Marco was working with this guy the entire time. This guy actually was the reason why everybody woke up, because he was trying to open one pod. He was trying to open the pod for Marco, and what he did was he snuck in, impersonated somebody else, and the AI system wouldn't let Marco's pod up on his own, so he shut down the entire AI system and rebooted everything. And that's when we realized that Marco's like a double agent. Marco goes to check on something, a noise that he heard, and Kasumi confronts our guy here. And he confesses to her. He's like, yeah, I'm not an engineer. I'm actually the guy who developed the cryogenic tubes that you all slept in. And like, I did it for one. I thought it would be a Nobel Prize. And two, I thought it would, save people's lives. But then I found out the truth that really this is an organization that's really just manipulating people, and they're the cause for everything. So I figured I'll do this to set things right, as it were. As he's telling her this, she's legitimately upset. She's just chewing him out. She's asking him questions, not paying attention that behind her is another one of these Death Source creatures sneaking up. And he gives her a SD card and he tells her, the person who unlocks the knowledge for Medusa wins the game. Guard this with your life. And she's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I will pay for my crimes. And he kicks a chair and knocking her down as this creature jumps in, and it bites onto his head. Well, we know how that's going to end. Marco shows up, starts shooting at the creature. She grabs the chip. They start making a run for it, and they jump like this cavern in order to escape the creature. But you could tell the creature's still alive. It's just heavily injured. But as they are escaping this creature, they are reunited with the rest of the group. And that's when we find out Marco is actually a lieutenant. He's part of the army, not U.S. Army, as like a special forces, I want to say British Army unit. And his job was to get the intel. And if he can't get the intel, find Vega, who is the Russian dude that has been running the entire show, the religious zealot we mentioned at the beginning. Now, on top of that, we think that nothing much more is going to happen from there. But then they hear banging and knocking on the door, and they're thinking, oh my God, the creatures are back. And they open the door because they're like, what if he's human? We have to take the chance. And when they open it, it's Vega, the guy he's been searching for all along. It's a convenient plot point, but it happened. And Vega shows them there's a secret entryway through the room that they're in to another hallway. At which point he starts divulging the real reason why everything's happened. He was like a military soldier or general. They came across a village after a meteorite had crashed, which killed everybody in the village but a little girl. And when they got there, they found a small little creature called Laura, I want to say. And the creature was attacking people, killing it. They killed the creature, but they found out through investigating that the creature was Laura's imaginary friend. Apparently the virus is an alien organism that infects people, and it can trigger you to create new life from yourself if it doesn't kill you first. And so basically she had the potential to create new life. She created her friend, and they wanted to manipulate this into making new creatures, make forced evolution, as it were. The problem is there's not a way to gear people's imaginations or steer them in the right way to have like 100% focus. And that's where the computer AI system came in. They tried this with the original girl, and she died in the process of all the experiments. They revised the machines, and the computer is now called Alice. And that's what's running the show. He thought everything was lost. He's like, we were trying to do an experiment, but then we found a new host that was actually better than anybody we ever picked. And when we tried to use her, our process was interrupted. And that's when we got a flashback of they found a host and they're experimenting, and you see all this new materials being developed from the host, and then the power shuts off. If that doesn't make it full circle, I don't know what it does. But funny enough, the power shuts off, and this is the cause. So the investigation that they wanted to do and infiltration was the cause of everything going to hell in a handbasket. Now, he didn't die in this excursion. Everything exploded and got out. But he tells them, he's like, listen, he's like, I am ready to meet my maker, my Lord and Savior, because I feel like I've done what's right. This may be chaos, but I've actually brought the ability for us to evolve, and this is God's will. This is what he believes, and he goes to try to commit suicide. And Kasumi, She's like, we're not leaving anybody behind anymore. And she stops him from taking suicide. Like it did much, though, because then the building started collapsing and he died in the collapsing rubble. So didn't do much. They're trying to run away. They run into another death source. It's the same one that's been chasing them the whole time. It's all burnt up, chopped up, and it's holding strong. And it wants Marco. It wants him bad. It's just going after him. And he's about to die. He's going toe and toe with this thing. He's going fisticuff. He's out of ammunition. And he's going to die. And he remembers his sister, who also we'll find out more about a little bit later. And right before he dies, the officer, the one token black man, shows up last minute, killing the Deathsaurus by shoving a sword through the bottom of its jaw as it's about to tear off Marco's head, because this sword was on the ground from fallen armory. Again, it's a castle. And as he's holding the Deathsaurus up, he turns to stone. His virus had activated and he petrifies along with the creature. Then we cue to Marco chasing back after everybody else. Now we're down to just the four. They finally get outside and they're wanting to escape, but Kasumi wants to go back inside because she believes it's Shizuku that is the new host for this Medusa virus. They don't stop her because she gets past them, and of course everything's falling apart. The island's collapsing. Marco jumps into this helicopter they find, which was the same helicopter that brought in the Italian minister. And the little boy and the lady are in the helicopter with her. And as they're trying to fly back after Kasumi, the woman loses her cool. She goes, no, we're not going after her. We're going to fly away from here, far, far away. I will not let anything hurt my son. And Marco looks at her. He's like, that's not your son, lady. She goes, he is now. That's my boy. I'm going to protect him. And there's a little bit of scuffle. She apparently starts showing symptoms of the virus again. And she she collapses in pain. And she ends up shooting the council with a gun, and they lose control of the helicopter. Mind you, while the helicopter's collapsing, the castle's completely covered in these thorn vines that are now opening these giant wings and like this thorn lizard-like head, kind of like a dragon. And the helicopter falls. Marco flies out the helicopter, but the kid and her are sliding down the helicopter, not down the vines elsewhere. Back down to the ground, actually. Marco breaks in. He manages to catch up to Kasumi, and they go to the main room that they're supposed to infiltrate into. At which point, time freezes for a split second, and then everything looks different for Marco, and he realizes Kasumi's gone, and there's his sister. And his sister looks just like the girl that we saw that jumped off the building at the beginning of the film, because it is. And he's like, you can't be here. And she's like, I know, I'm your sister, but I'm not your sister. And she starts kicking the crap out of Marco. It's the AI system, and he doesn't know how it's doing it until it dawns on him. The chip in his neck is what's allowing him to see his sister, because that's the chip that they installed is also the reason why they were able to manipulate their brains while they were dreaming. So Marco says, I'm sorry. Marco says goodbye, and he puts the gun to his neck and he shoots. Now, this doesn't really kill Marco, but it does get rid of the chip in a very quick manner. And you see the vines are all tangled up in an almost body-like shape, and he destroys the vines that were attacking him. And he goes to head after Kasumi, who had a head start. We see that she's in a separate room, and she sees her sister laying down on the table. So she goes to chase after her sister, and the vines stop her, and they start wrapping around her, and she hears her sister's voice. And the vines form up in front of her, and they form her sister in a separate body. And she's like, that's not you. I want to see my real sister. And she's like, this is a facsimile. This is me based on what you're thinking, just like you are, you. And Shizuki, or Vine's Shizuki, is just telling her, I just want to protect you. I will let you go. Just turn away. Let this happen. And Kasumi is like, I will not. And she just keeps going until she starts bleeding from her limbs. And Shizuki flips out. She doesn't want to hurt her sister at all. So she lets her go, and she instead starts begging Kasumi, don't go near the body. Please, just turn away. I don't want you to see this. You don't know what you're doing. Don't unlock this. Please don't do this. And when she gets there, she realizes Kasumi looks at the body, and the first thing she notices, the scar on the leg is not there. And then she opens, and then she stands up, and she grabs like the wrists, and she sees the scar from the cuts on her wrists are actually there. So the body on the table is actually Kasumi's body. Now we go to a flashback. What had happened was when Suzuki went to go do the pinky swear promise with Kasumi, she slapped her hand away. She's like, no, we can't promise on something like that. It's not going to be strong. It's like, we could just end it right now. We can just jump off this cliff and be done. And that's it. I don't have to be without you. You don't have to be without me. And that's it. And she goes to drag her, and Suzuki, fights with her a little bit, and then they both fall off the cliff. But because of the angle they fell off, Suzuki fell onto a ledge where Kasumi fell all the way down. And this triggered the infection, the Medusa, because apparently psychological trauma is a very strong urge that can cause transformation to begin, to create new life. But it's just chaotic in the human mind. So they were using this opportunity when they noticed that Suzuki was starting to activate and trigger these new things. Vega captured her super quick. It was right there. She's right in front of them. And they started to manipulate her using Alice. But then when Alice shut down, all that energy and all that new creations just exploded. And one of the alternative life that was created was Kasumi. And then basically this entire excursion, this entire thing was to Suzuku wanting to protect Kasumi by creating a whole new environment, a whole new world where the idea that Kasumi is dead doesn't exist. So the only way to guarantee that is you eliminate all evidence, because there was news reporters, there's witnesses, you gotta kill them all. And, basically steer everything around Kasumi. Even though it's gonna be dangerous, all the things that were around her were placed there to make sure that she stays safe. And everybody else doesn't care about Kasumi. And once this is all realized, Suzuki realizes that they can't coexist, and then that she's causing too much of a risk because the vines and everything are expanding to the across the countryside. So she essentially self-destructs. Marco gets there. They escape, but the building's collapsing because now this flying dragon castle is falling out the sky. And the last energy that Suzuku has creates these vines to capture the two of them and place them back on the island safe and sound on the one piece of land that hasn't been destroyed yet. And she's talking about how it's going to be rough, and she doesn't know if she can live through this. And Marco says, just grant a dying warrior his last wish. Don't give up. She's like, what? And she turns around and he's dead. I'm assuming it's because he got shot. He shot himself in the neck. He did get a lot of other injuries, but I'm quite sure that man bled out. And then she's walking away, and we see she runs into the little boy. The lady that was with him, she didn't make it. And he's like, what do you want to do now? And she's like, let's just walk. Maybe we can find your parents. Let's just walk. He's like, okay. And they start walking off. And that's the movie. That's the end of the movie. Okay, so this movie, there's a lot to unpack. As far as animation goes, it starts off pretty good. I like the fact that they would use CGI for some of the creatures as well as the background design, and the cartoon style is really good. But I am not a fan of when you're juggling from like artwork style, like drawn sketch work, to CGI sketch work for your characters. I've seen that done in like the animated show Baki and some other ones where it looks like one style and then jumps to other. It stands out way too much. So for me, I wasn't a fan of that. When you can see that like they're just standing and they're talking and they have some action going back and forth, it's okay. But then when they're going to the heavy action and they go straight all CGI for the heavy action, it feels like it takes away from the animation style and the feel. It makes it feel more cheap because it looks like a video game at that point. So it doesn't really work for me in that area. Dialogue wise, now granted, I had to watch this in English because I did not have the DVD and I had to find this on YouTube. Apparently it's not on your major streaming services. I saw, like, I did a search and it said it on Crunchyroll, and I didn't see it on Crunchyroll when I looked. And so YouTube saved the day for me. I found it there, but it was only the English version. And so they were trying to duplicate a lot of foreign accents, which in some cases worked and a lot of cases didn't. So it seemed almost comical, how they were doing some of the foreign accents that they were doing. They may have been able to get away more if they just did more of an American accent for a lot of the other characters instead, honestly. I mean, it synced up fairly well with the dialogue, everything they were saying. I just didn't like the accents portion. As far as conversations go, the dialogue subjects were good. I don't feel like they were not worthy for the story. So if it was a direct translation for the subtitles, I think they probably did a good job because it didn't feel out of place. Sound score, I enjoyed the sound score actually. That was one of my highlights. The sound score would go into like these moments of like dramatic fantasy music to these moments of really tense, high-end pace music that to symbolize like when you should be tense, and I enjoy that. That's the kind of thing I like when I hear a sound score. I don't need necessarily a soundtrack. I want something that's going to keep me on pace with what's supposed to be the tone of the film. So it's actually really good in that sense. Now, overall story. I'm a little bit conflicted with this. The overall story is, I like the beginning. I like the beginning a lot. It, especially given today's time and era that we're in, it scarily made me think about that. And then on top of which, tying it into like a horror scenario actually is kind of cool. Now, when they started going more into the sci-fi, going into the fantasy section of it, where it starts giving you the answers and the reasoning, feels very complicated. I mean, I was able to grasp it, but I mean, like, wow, we're really grasping. There's a lot going on just to get this happening. Because it's going from like sci-fi to borderline fantasy of how this is being able to execute. And some of the points in the story actually feel like they just kind of made these things happen to make it connect. Because there were some moments there that were like, how and why did this actually happen? It was like just coincidentally, it just happens perfectly like that. But it does. All in all, I would say this is probably going to be a 2 out of 5 NerdTots. You know, on your average anime fan that likes watching a lot of anime, this will probably be higher, be closer to a 3 out of 5. I will say 2 out of 5 for the party that is not into anime. They're new to the subject. Again, the animation style not being cohesive, jumping back and forth, it's losing some of the quality when they're doing that. The storyline jumping from one thing to another and making it more complex by more and more complex by the time they hit the end makes you kind of feel not connected to the movie, if that makes sense to you guys. And all in all, it ends not on a point where you're going to be like, I feel complete. That's why I'm feeling like this is going to be a 2 out of 5. 3 out of 5 for anime fans because we're used to that stuff. We don't mind not feeling complete because sometimes we know there's more to the story or we want there to be more. And at the same time, we just want the experience at the same time. We just want to know, you know, okay, this is a possibility. It's like an Elseworld story. But I feel like that's what we come to enjoy about anime. But that's something you don't start off with. You have to get honed and trained into enjoying that aspect of anime. I could be completely wrong, but that's my opinion. All in all, I still appreciate this movie. Even though I feel it's a 2 out of 5, I still think it's a solid movie in that sense. I had a good time watching it. Setting aside my criticism, I still enjoyed watching it, and time flew by fairly quickly with me. I would say thank you again, Abe Monkeo. If anybody, or Abe, if you have more suggestions, or if anybody else has suggestions, yes, please put them in the comments. I will look at those and I will put them on my list of things to watch. And thank you so very much. If you appreciate this video, hit like. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. Other than that, thank you so very much. As always, continue watching anime, expand your mind, and just be excellent. Laters.
Let's go.